and you're our guest this week, and you're going to tell us a little bit about kind of a different aspect of service. I've been focusing mainly on military, but I'm also interested in getting stories of fire, EMS, and police, and you fall into that last category. But
Well, I
tell
fall
me
into the
about.
first. I fall into the first category too.
Well, sure, but I mean, you're reserve component, correct?
No, I wasn't. I was I was active duty.
Oh, how did I get misunderstood? Okay, well, good thing I have
I
you
don't.
on because you're going to fill me in. I obviously need
What
it.
I I don't know how maybe we probably never really talked about it. You just showed up on Vet Nation one day and uh and we just kind of went from there. And
Yeah,
next thing you know, we're friends. We're tweeting at each other. And
yeah, yeah.
is that what you do? You tweet at each other? That doesn't seem
Well, yeah,
tweet.
we tag
You
each
tweet?
other in tweets for
Oh
sure.
yeah, we
Yeah,
tweet at each other. Yeah. I
perfect.
post things, you share them, nobody watches. I don't know, it's just how it goes.
Ah, hopefully we could change that last part, but
Yeah,
yeah, but you're
yeah.
oh,
So I was active. I was active duty. I enlisted in um, January of '91 because I was at University of Montana when Iraq invaded Kuwait,
mhm.
and I bought the line that Kuwait was this poor helpless country that hadn't done anything to provoke Iraq. And then
Mhm.
years later I learned that Kuwait had been lateral drilling into Iraqi oil fields and taking their oil.
Ah,
So if you don't believe me, look it up. Just kind of like weapons of mass destruction. um,
mhm.
but I was at the University of Montana and home of the Grizz, and it was also Berkeley, the new Berkeley. It was a radical left wing campus. I mean, there
Wow,
were
you wouldn't think
protest.
so.
Well, it's kind of like that quintessential university, feel. You just get that a lot with universities anyway. And back then, it was nothing like it is now. I mean,
Oh, true. Yeah, nothing.
89 was, nothing at all. I mean, even Radical Zenner over here going, oh, hold on. That
Yeah,
seems a little Marxist,
yeah,
and now
yeah.
the Marxists on campus are going, hey, that's not Marxist enough.
Right,
So,
right.
um, and I watched flag burnings at the university. I watched them assault guys in ROTC uniform and on their way to
Oh
their
man.
classes and stuff, and watched them pee on and burn a flag at the the federal courthouse in Missoula. And
Wow.
I'm like, well, college isn't going well. I'm not used to studying, so
Fair
and
enough.
and well, I made it through high school on on everything but math with in
Mhm.
flying colors. I didn't like math, and so I didn't know how to study. I
Ah,
could walk in, I could take a history test, I could take an English test, I could take a lit test, a psychology test, all that stuff. I can go and take
right.
those tests and pass them with flying colors,
Mhm.
walk into math. And so, and you don't study. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody says. If you're not good at math, all the studying in the world is not going to make you good at math. So I
Right.
had no idea what to do when I got to college.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be easy, and all of a sudden I had to go out and do all this stuff on my own, and it wasn't going well. And war came. I did my countercultural thing at the time, and instead of joining all the lefties, I went off and joined the army because I was gonna go and I was gonna go fight for liberty
There you
in the
go.
world. And
Yeah.
I got halfway through basic training, and the drill sergeants came in the middle of the night and said, "Well, we got good news and we got bad news." Well, what's the good news? The war's over. What's the bad news? You're still in the army.
Yep, yep.
Yep. So
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's what I did, and I enlisted and had enlisted to go airborne,
Okay.
uh, and and
Wow.
and so I finished basic. Okay, there again, for those of you in the Navy and the Marines, we don't have boot camp. We have basic training.
Ah,
We knew how to put boots on before we got there.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And then you learned how to tie them
Oh no,
once you
we knew how to
graduated?
tie them as well. So I mean, so like for my Marine
Incredible.
friends who are watching Skipper, I'm talking to you. We didn't have an extra. We didn't have an extra like 2 weeks just on boot tying. So
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
for anybody
Well,
who doesn't know, Skipper is my co-host on Veteran Nation, which is how I met Andrea. So,
yes, yes, indeed.
um, so we, I finished basic, went to AIT, had a really long AIT. It was one of the longest at the time, outside of a few of the military intelligence
Hmm.
schools, and um, part of that was because of the equipment I was working with was new for the military, SINGARs, um, single channel ground to air communications
Okay. Okay.
radio or ground to air radios, and I mean it's old technology now, but
Well, I'm
back then it
sure
was.
now, whatever the school is now, I'm sure it's even longer with all the more complex
Well,
systems
yeah,
you
I
have
mean
to learn.
we were working with like, and we were working with like field operated facsimile machines at the time. So like
Wow.
we were fielding and working on security nets.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Everything we were doing was a predecessor to encrypted secure communications that you see in the civilian world today, and uh,
Incredible.
used by government agencies, and
Yeah.
we were even working with digital burst technology at the time, which is and the equivalent of what cell phone systems are now,
Hmm.
with mast antennas and whatnot. So all of that stuff was in 89 and 90
Right,
or
right.
9, it had started coming in 89, 90, 91, and that was
Mhm.
kind of the equipment I was working with.
Like,
And
how big was some of this equipment? I mean, was this like, something that they would issue on an individual level, like to one troop, or are you working in like uh, a center, or how did that work?
well, when you went into a deployment, you were talking about uh, 30-meter mast antennas that could be deployed
Wow.
in a war fighting situation. And if you're not
Hmm.
familiar, and I know you are, but if you're one of those unfortunate non-military people who are just kind of passing by going, oh, what's this about? 30 meters is high for
Yeah.
a portable piece of equipment.
Hmm.
That's,
A little over 3 first downs that you'd have to go for.
thanks for putting it in terminology that I don't understand. So
I don't know. I figure if you don't understand
I
meters, you might understand some football stuff.
I'm I'm in
Maybe.
I, well, I live in Minnesota, and so even when I still did watch football,
Hmm.
the Vikings very rarely were getting first downs. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You'd have to
in
change
fact,
channel to Green
oh,
Bay.
for Vikings fans, it's 3 personal penalties.
Yeah, or personal fouls. Two,
A
little over
little
two
over,
of those. Yeah.
yeah, a little over 2 of the personal fouls. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you're Vikings fans, not Raiders fans, so you're not racking them up that quickly. But yeah, probably more applicable.
It's really intimidating to try and not be funny when I'm in a room with a comedian. Well, I'm
Yeah,
not in a room with a comedian, but
close enough.
no one pays me for my comedy.
Ah, bummer. Ah, these things happen. Well,
Well, so yeah, that was some of the stuff that we were working with, but like I was when I got to permanent, I ended up in Germany for a while,
mhm,
and then I came back from Germany and went to Fort Bragg, and I was with the 82nd Airborne Division, and
okay.
for non-military people, that is Fort Bragg's the home of the Airborne.
Mhm.
It's also at the time was home of Joint Special Operations Command. Um, I think JSOC got moved down to Florida now, and but it still was then and still is a home of Fifth Special Forces Group, which is
Yeah.
also where all the Special Forces training takes place, and the Delta Force is real. Um, Del- Delta
Yes, they
Force
are.
is headquartered there as well at Manchester. Well, it's on the maps. It's referred to as Manchester Impact Area, which is supposed to be an artillery range. But then when you drive by, it's the only artillery range in the United States military that is surrounded by uh, 15, 20-foot high chain link fence with concertina wire on the top of it.
They mean business. Doesn't look very
They,
inviting.
yeah. Well, and I don't even know if Delta's still there, but they were then, and one of the reasons was because the 82nd is the force multiplier for special forces and for Delta Force,
Okay.
and so we do a lot of cross training and cooperative work together, and like I say that like it was me, I like I'm still there. But we would do a lot of cross training with them because that's what we were there for, and it was an interesting experience for me because it was high speed all the time.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it was just, and I was a nobody.
Environment.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I had a top secret security clearance because of the equipment I was working on and worked with. So I was that guy that, one of these radios would go down and you had to take it to the repair depot and you couldn't leave it. There was
Yep.
no not, it was like put it in the
Oh yeah.
box and have somebody drop it off on their way across post.
Oh
You
yeah.
couldn't
That doesn't
transport it in
fly.
a POV, of personal vehicle. It had to be transported in a military vehicle, and you
Oh
couldn't
yeah.
set it aside or any of that stuff. And if it had to be
Serious
in
business.
yeah, it's serious. Like, uh, and that was a portion of my time. A lot of times when we weren't readying for deployment, my experience was like literally walking this equipment everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
And even like secure signal generators,
Mhm.
with they were called KYKs. um,
Okay.
these things generated literally top secret security code generators, or they
Mhm.
would generate these top secret codes that you would then plug them into the radio equipment and transfer that code to the radio equipment, and then
Okay.
nobody could communicate without that code.
That's how the encryption went. It's sorta like the
Yeah.
plot of, Doctor Strangelove. Never mind. Don't keep going.
I'd have to think. It's been a long time since I've seen Doctor Strangelove, so I'd have to. Yeah. So that piece of equipment would go down. You had to do something with it.
Sure.
We had security manuals, like code manuals that had
Mhm.
all of the communication codes. That those things didn't get left around. You just leave them laying around,
Right,
and
right.
they had to be destroyed. And so,
Yep.
oftentimes, even when I was over in Germany, and when I came back, you'd get tasked with that. There
Mhm.
was either there was the option of burning them or shredding them, and it
Yep.
wasn't like it was just like, "Oh, go throw them in the shredder and walk away." No, you shredded every single one of those things,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what I did. I was a nobody. I
Mhm.
Nothing special. I wasn't a ranger. I wasn't special forces. And there again, so people understand the difference between special operations and special forces. Army special operations units are the special forces. They're not the
Yep.
Green Beret. That's what we call them, but
Mhm.
they're actually called special forces,
Yes.
and they're part of the special operations community. But
Mhm.
they do something completely different than what Delta does. They do something completely different than what the SEALs do. They do something completely different than what Marines special operations do,
Right.
um, because they're all tasked with different taskings.
Yes.
And so for us, what the special forces would do is they would go in, they would be a warfighter unit and a resistance training team
Mhm.
who would go in behind enemy lines. That was what they would do, and they would train guerrilla units,
Right,
resistance
right.
units, and our job was to be available for them at the drop of a hat.
Yes.
So if they got deployed somewhere and things went south and they came across a large enemy element,
Mhm.
they'd say, "We need backup and we need it now."
Yeah, yeah. Where is it? Uh-huh.
Where is it? And that was, anywhere in the world, wheels up in 18 hours for the 82nd Airborne Division. And
Wow.
people are like, well, 18 hours is a long time to wait. Well, it sounds like a long time to wait,
Yeah.
which when it's you, it
Mhm.
definitely is a long time to wait
Yeah.
when you're waiting for it. But that's a massive deployment and that's
Mhm.
fast.
Oh,
And,
yeah. A
and
lot of
part of,
things have to go right to
oh
hit
yeah.
that 18-hour mark. Yeah.
And part of that was rotational ready brigades. So
Mhm.
the division was broke into several different brigades, and each brigade was tasked with a different thing. There'd be the resting brigade, and the resting brigade they had just come off of act or readiness status,
Yeah.
and so that they would do their field train, or they'd take their leave, they'd get passes, PT tests and all that kind of stuff. That's when they would be working on all of that. Everybody did PT every day,
Oh, of
but that's kind
course.
of when you were, that's when you were kind of a little bit more relaxed.
Right.
You could go about, well, for the guys at Fort Bragg, it was mostly hanging out at the adult clubs. Uh,
Of course.
Not the married guys, though. That never happened.
No.
Um, but and then there was the training brigade, and
Mhm.
that brigade would be going to the ranges, um, medical, training, uh, combat lifesaver training, all that stuff.
Yes.
Going through all of that, and then you went into readiness status. And well, readiness status was you literally went nowhere.
Yeah.
You didn't get a pass. You weren't allowed to drink. You weren't allowed anything because you had to be ready to go on a recall.
Mhm.
And so we would be attached out. So I was in the signal battalion, and each battalion, as the platoons were broke down, you were broke down into being attached to a different brigade.
Mhm.
And depending on what your career occupation was, you might rotate to a different brigade every time for that readiness,
Right.
because the brigades didn't each have their own signal battalion. They relied on the signal battalion to provide that support for them.
Mhm.
And that meant all of your equipment would be packed up and geared up for what's called heavy drop
Right.
and awaiting
Mhm.
deployment and at all times.
Yeah.
And then the heavy drop sites where that stuff was stored and geared up at there had to be security on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
No tampering.
no tampering, yeah, and no tampering. And that was armed security, and that wasn't handled by the MPs. That was handled by line staff,
Mhm.
from the units. And so we would rotate through on that as well.
Sure.
Although you did feel a little bit like Barney Fife because they gave you an M16 with a magazine with like five rounds in it. I'm like, is somebody really coming at us on this one? 5 rounds
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
enough? I mean,
Yeah,
no offense,
what
bro.
am I in the
Everybody,
state of New York?
when
Man, ridiculous. Yeah.
or Minnesota at this point, they're with what they're trying. But anyway,
True.
so I went through all of that, and when I joined, Bush one was president.
Mhm.
When I was over in Germany, Clinton was elected, and I saw what he was doing because then he started the massive drawdown
Yes, yes.
on the
Yeah, a lot
military
of
during that
bases
time.
closed
Oh,
under him,
yeah.
for sure.
People were optioned out, and
Mhm.
um, and they were involuntarily separated, even though they had done nothing wrong.
Right, right.
And so all this drawdown was happening, and everybody was like, "Are you going to reenlist? You're going to reenlist?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I don't know that this guy isn't going to be president again."
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to like reenlist and then like 2 weeks later get kicked out. And I didn't really enjoy my military life. I wasn't like,
Right.
there's some guys like, oh, it was awesome every day. And I'm like, even in war, and like, yeah, even war. And I'm like,
Don't
what?
understand that at all.
No, like, no,
Yeah,
like, I became disillusioned, honestly,
yeah.
because it was just, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't,
Yeah, yeah.
I did my job well. I wasn't great. Wasn't, anything special. Like I said, I wasn't Captain America or anything like that, or
Sure.
Sergeant Slaughter because I was
Mhm.
enlisted.
Yeah.
Um, but it just wasn't. It just wasn't just like it wasn't for me, and
Mhm.
it just didn't feel. Uh, you know, it, I wasn't the party guy,
Yeah.
and And it's really, when you had downtime, that's what everybody did is party.
Of
Let's go,
course.
let's go party. And I'm like, I'm not the party guy.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to do that. And then you get a lot of the recruiting pressure. If you
Mhm.
stay in, if you re-enlist, we'll give you this bonus, we'll give you that bonus. And then of course, depending on your MOS and some of your scores, the special forces guys might come over and talk to you. And they had to like infantry guys were a dime
Mhm.
a dozen at Fort Bragg.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not knocking them. They're the ones who fight the war,
Mhm.
but they were a dime a dozen. They all wanted to go special forces.
Of
And of
course.
course, we were all jump qualified, so we
Mhm.
had that was right out of the way right away. We didn't have to worry about that. Some
Yeah.
of them had ranger tabs, but hadn't actually been in ranger units, and they were like constantly, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to do Q course and selection. I want to be in special forces, but they weren't getting comms guys.
Ah,
They weren't getting um, language specialist, and those guys
right.
have to learn how to speak languages quick. Well, unfortunately for me, I
Sure.
was a comms guy and I scored pretty high on the D lab.
Yes, the language battery. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I had passed up a contract extension at the beginning of basic training when I scored on the D lab, after I scored high on the D lab, because they told me I had to sign a 5-year contract extension because the school was a year and a half long
Ah, yeah, yeah, that
after
makes sense.
AIT and jump
Mhm.
school. Now, that was stupid because that would have been out at Fort Ord, California for a
Mhm.
year and a half,
Yeah.
but
Not a
I was
bad
like
life.
five more years on top of the 4. I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And I just kicked it around. I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna take the risk of reenlisting just so I can
Possibly
take the
get kicked out
possibly
or
go special forces." And so I had to give time of some sort because
yeah.
you sign up for 8 years. People don't
Yeah, yeah,
understand this.
it's true.
There's no such thing as do 4 years and then you can just walk away. No, if you sign up for a 4-year contract, you have to do
Yep.
8 years.
Mhm. Yeah, so one
And
way or another.
one way or another, they're getting their time out of you. And I thought, well, I could keep getting a paycheck if I did the National Guard. And
Fair
this is the
enough.
part I'm not real proud of myself on this one, but my eyes got open real fast after I showed up for National Guard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I came directly from Fort Bragg
Mhm.
to Minnesota National Guard unit. And my first drill weekend, I showed up and I didn't have their approved gear. I showed
Ah,
up with my uniform, my beret, because I didn't have a field cap. That was
right, right,
that
yeah, you
that
don't
was
know.
like when you were in the field, you didn't wear a field cap, you wore your Kevlar.
Mhm.
And when you weren't in the field, you wore a beret.
Yep.
And so I didn't have any of that stuff anymore.
Mhm.
And so I showed up in a beret, and the first thing that happened is I got my ass chewed for it.
Of course. Yeah.
And then they wanted to know where all my equipment was because they were going to do an inventory. I was like, well, nobody communicated to me.
Yeah.
I was told to be here at this address at such and such a time on such and such a day, and that they would have everything for me.
Yeah.
I didn't get field gear at all from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
My whole entire week, that first weekend, nobody said a word to me.
Yeah.
I didn't meet the company
Nothing has
commander.
changed.
Nothing. Yeah, right. I'm sure. I didn't meet the company commander. I didn't meet the company first sergeant. My platoon sergeant goes, because I was comms. He goes, "You were in infantry," and I'm like, "Do you not know anything about me,
Yeah, yeah.
sergeant?
What?
Nothing." I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be a jerk, sergeant, but do you not know who I am at all?
Yeah.
I'm like, and not like, do you know who I am?
Right, right.
I do that
Yeah.
now,
Worded
but
a little differently, different
now
emphasis.
I say that.
Yeah.
Do you not know who I am?
Well, yeah, because people should know.
Uh, but he looks at, what's your MOS, and I was like, well, I think at the time they finally changed it to 31 uniform. I had gone in as a 31 Vic, which was signal,
Mhm.
and I'm like 31 uniform. Oh, you're a comms guy. I'm like, yeah. He goes, we don't really need people like you around here. There's a comm shop. Go back there, count batteries and wire this weekend.
Oh my god.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Are you kidding me?
He goes, this is an infantry unit. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but
Yeah.
I'm like,
How is that my fault?
you realize I'm
Yeah.
coming from the 82nd Airborne. He goes, so what's that mean? I said, I could do anything you can do.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm getting mad. I'm like, and probably better.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
Actually,
he goes, well, yeah, but we really don't need guys like you around here, and we're short comms, so you can go and comm shop where you belong and stay there. I'm like, okay. That was my first weekend. The whole
ugh.
weekend.
At least they didn't have some, they always have like a base in doc or something, and they just waste an entire weekend telling you about sexual harassment or something. And
Yeah, that wasn't quite as a big of a deal back then as it is now.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
probably not.
yeah. That's when they were still like kicking girls out of the army for getting pregnant.
Fascinating. It was a different time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, you got pregnant? You can't do anything.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Um, as much of a sexist as my Navy service turned me into, even that seems a little,
A little
a little
harsh,
steep.
really. Yeah,
But,
yeah,
but
you're the first female misogynist I've met.
oh well, pleased to meet you, sir.
Yeah. Oh, so I that was my experience, and like they didn't even want me to let me go home. They're like, "Well, you don't live in Rochester because this is Rochester." I'm like, "I live 30 miles south of town." Yeah, well, the
Ugh.
policy is if you don't live in Rochester, you can't go home. I'm like, "I'm going home."
Yeah, yeah. Stop me.
I'm like, "I'm going home."
Yeah,
And so on the next drill that I was supposed to go to, we were supposed to go to a range, and I'm like, "Yes,
finally.
wonderful."
Yeah.
Show up because they told me I was going to the range with them. I'm like, okay, somebody woke up.
Yeah.
I I got there. I went to go draw a weapon
Mhm.
because everybody at the court in the military, even in the Navy, everybody basically is an infantryman.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah, you
comes
gotta be
down
able to
to.
shoot.
You got to be able to shoot. I'm like, great. I get to go qualify. They can see that I can shoot. I was on a bad day, I was mediocre in the sense of like, because there was like barely qualified, and I don't know if they've changed it and all. There was barely qualified, and then there was marksman, and then there was sharpshooter or whatever it was,
Right.
and or expert, yeah, marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. I
Yeah.
was
Same in
qualifying as
the
expert
Navy.
constantly,
Oh wow.
constant,
Fantastic.
constantly. And I'm like, yes, I can go and show them I can do this. I got there. I was like, I'm here to get my weapon. Who are you? And I'm like, well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
the comms guy. The armory sergeant comes up. He goes, yeah, you don't get a weapon. I'm like, what?
Uh
What? He goes,
yeah.
yeah, you don't get a weapon. I'm like, the hell you say?
Yeah.
He goes, well, you're not infantry. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, what do you need to qualify for? I said, oh, I don't know, because this is a warfighting unit, and they're,
Yeah.
and I'll probably end up deploying and being in one of these, vehicles with
Yeah.
you guys. Wouldn't it be nice to know I can shoot? No, your job is to run the radios. And I said, so then why am I going to the range? He goes,
Yeah.
well, you got to be there for the qualification. I'm like, yeah, exactly. What I
Yeah.
found out was they needed somebody to run the range, the range safety radio.
Of course.
And I got there, and we had these radio systems called OE2, or antenna systems are called OE254s,
Mhm.
and they weren't like the 30-meter mast antennas we were talking about. And I get there, and the NCOIC says, get that radio set up, get the radio going so we can get this range underway. And I
Mhm.
said, you want me to set this antenna up by myself?
Yeah.
I said, you have any idea how tall that is?
Yeah.
He goes, don't be a smartass. And I'm like, I'm not, but then, like, I cannot, like, literally I cannot set this antenna up. I can set it up by myself, and then I know how to do it, but I need more people. He goes, well, you're the only comms guy, and nobody else is trained, and that's not their job. That's your job. And I said, there's an antenna on top of that building. He goes, that's not what I told you to do.
Oh my god.
And I said, Sarge, with all due respect, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to use that antenna,
Yeah.
and I'll have your radio up in about 3 minutes. He
Yeah.
goes, listen here, soldier. I'm going to bust your ass down to private if you don't do what I told you to do. And I'm like,
This is the National Guard, prick.
National Guard. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I'm going. You want your radio up? You're not going to give me help. That's the only way you're getting your radio up, so you can get your
Yeah.
range done.
Yeah.
And I got their radio set up through the antenna on the range safety control tower, and got them going. And that's all I did. I actually ended up at one
How
point. I looked
boring.
over and I saw snipers
Mhm.
that were there training for the week, and I went over and was talking to them, and they were all from 101st and the 82nd. And they're like,
Oh, okay.
you know, it had been at one point, and I'm like, oh
Sure.
man, and they're like, were you 82nd? I'm like, yeah. Like, how are they treating you? I said, like dog crap,
Yeah.
and he's like, yeah, it's your MOS. They don't understand. And I got my ass chewed because I was over talking to this other unit and shooting with them, and um, we were just, you know, I didn't have to be there. I wasn't running the radio. He didn't even want me to run the radio because I wasn't the safety, sorry, you know,
Amazing.
NCOIC. So got done with that. That's all I did that entire weekend. Went, you know, hours away from home to go there, and I did a couple of more drills, and I started writing letters of resignation, saying,
Oh,
"Look,
yeah.
I know that I signed up for this and that I got a signing bonus, but I'll pay it back, whatever. Just take it
Right.
out at whatever." And I attempted to have a meeting with the company commander. I had attempted to have a meeting with company first sergeant. I attempted over and over and over again to, like, I'm like, this is not working. This is stupid. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of your money. I'm not
Mhm.
getting any training. You're not treating. I'm like, I was a combat lifesaver, which at
Yeah.
the time was, it's not just like normal first aid. I was IV
Right.
qualified. I knew how to do all of that stuff. I trained in, you know, infantry tactics. We were expected to do that in the 82nd. There
Yep.
wasn't any of that. No, you're not. Like, everybody got that training. And
Mhm.
I said, it's a waste of my time. I'm not coming in anymore.
Yeah.
And I was getting some traction, but then they started sending me letters telling me, we're going to dishonorably discharge you. And I'm like, you can't dishonorably discharge me for that. I said, I already have an honorable discharge from active duty. Nobody's
Yeah.
going to look at a dishonorable, any kind of discharge from the National Guard. And what's it matter? It's not going to affect anything that I have going forward. And I'm never going to rejoin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, we'll give you a general discharge. I'm like, and we'll bust you down in rank. I'm like, I'm not getting paid.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
What's it? And there again, I'm not proud of it. I should have finished the commitment, but I was pissed and I was already disillusioned.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah. It's
I'm just like, uh, whatever, you know, I'm done. And I didn't look back. And
no, and
I don't
I
tell the
don't blame
story
you.
very often because a lot of people, you know, get pissed off at me. And somebody was like, "You're that stolen valor guy," and I'm like, "What are you
What?
talking about?" Oh yeah, because I claimed I was active duty and I was only in the guard, and then I washed out of that, and I'm like,
No, not
no, that's not how
not
it.
the order of operations.
That's
Wow.
not how it happened. Yeah,
I,
I'm like, probably shouldn't have told this story, but
no, no.
um,
I appreciate you sharing that with me because, like, I was disillusioned my last 2 years of reserves with the Navy, and I was like, I'll finish it out. And honestly, we were mainly remote, so it wasn't real work. That helped. And then for whatever reason, the unit liked me. But if I had to deal with that and the unit hated me and I'm coming in and I'm wasting my time and whatever else, I'd probably try a lot harder to get out, go IRR something just to get out of there
well,
because what a waste of time banging
and
your
that was
head
the
against
thing.
a
I went
wall.
immediately to IRR status.
Oh,
So,
good.
well,
Win-win.
yeah, like, it wasn't. I still had the time that I had to be available if the crap ever hit, you know, the fecal matter ever hit the whirling blades of the oscillating air mover.
Right.
Um, they would still, you know, have that before they started a draft. They'd be calling up everybody on IRR, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm just done. I'm like, that's fine. I wasn't worried about it, and I just walked away. The only thing that makes me
Good.
mad is I paid all that money in for the GI Bill and never used the college money.
Jeez. Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, you pay in $100 every month your first year that you're in to get your GI
Yeah,
Bill
twelve
benefits.
hundred dollars is your investment.
Yep. And it hasn't changed with inflation last I checked, but I don't know if they're still doing Montgomery GI Bill. I did mine. If I ever use up my post 9/11, I can get my $1,200 back. Kind of nice, but I haven't
It,
I
yeah,
haven't
so
fallen
I
through that yet.
regret that I didn't do that, but I just
Mhm.
went on with my life, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go. I served my country. I took the oath.
Yeah.
I'm like I served, and then I got old, and uh, I entered a career field at the age of 39 that I never expected I would enter. I entered into the law enforcement world and
Wow.
became a deputy with a local sheriff's office and as a sworn deputy inside of a adult detention center.
Wow.
Don't think for a minute that is a safe job by
No,
any
no.
stretch of the imagination. Third largest metro area in the state of Minnesota, and if people want to laugh and say, "Well, it's Minnesota," so do not forget that being the third largest metro area, it may not be millions of people, but it's only outpopulated by Minneapolis and then St. Paul.
Yeah.
Which is the Twin Cities, the hub of the Twin Cities, which is only as big as it is because of all the communities around it. But Minneapolis is not a small city,
No.
and St. Paul is not a small city. And so the Rochester area, which is Olmsted County, who I worked for from 2000 January of 2009 until September of 2021, was it wasn't a joke by any stretch of the imagination. It was with a growing crime rate, like every metro area, and pretty much the entire state of Minnesota right now for the last few years.
Seems like a lot of metro areas for other states too. Just crime is just exploding.
Probably shouldn't use that word, but
I meant crime is just incinerating. Yeah, yeah.
I meant crime. The other word they're okay with. Just don't mention crime.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I took the oath again several times for that particular law enforcement agency, because every time there's a new sheriff, everybody gets sworn in under the new sheriff, and we take the same oath, but it's under a different sheriff. And so my, and I just so people know, Andrea and I had talked about this ahead of time. Do I talk about this at all? But because I want to respect what the show's about, and I don't want it to be just all about me, because, well, I guess that's kind of why you do the show, isn't it?
It's the decompression chamber. It's for you to decompress.
Clearly, you haven't watched enough of my videos. That's what I have done some decompressing.
Yes, you have.
But at the beginning of I almost automatically say "coof." At the beginning of the COVID scare in March, I was actually ahead of it and was warning people, be aware, this is not what they're making it out to be. I'm not saying it's not a real virus, but it's not what they're making it out to be. They're going to, and when I said they, I meant all of government. The state is going to step in, and they're going to start taking all sorts of liberties with our liberties.
Yeah.
And they're going to tell us where we can work, when we can work, how we can work. They're going to tell people they have to stay home, or they have to, they have to be isolated, and they're going to try and force, the vaccines on us. And everybody was laughing at me. And then the middle of March rolled around, and California announced that first wave of lockdowns in their state, and Minnesota was right behind them. Our governor was right behind them. And I'm like, people are like, how did you know that? And I'm like, because I've been paying attention.
Yeah. They really made it out with the videos that were leaked from China. It was like, look at these people dropping dead. And it's like, I don't know, like if a few malnourished peasants are having health problems,
or intentionally being starved out by their government.
Yeah, that's another big one too. Kind of like we are now. Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Andrea.
Oh, sorry.
Because I don't want to get Epsteined.
Yeah, good point.
Which is something New Yorkers can understand.
Yes. So. Yeah, what? Ghislaine Maxwell, is she still alive? Who knows? Yeah,
I think she must have like a dummy switch or a suicide switch. Like if something happens to her, everything gets released from somewhere else. I think that's the only reason that woman is still alive. But
probably, yeah.
But I was very vocal from the get-go that I was against anybody in at any level of the state telling me where I could go, when I could go, how I could go, and that was before they implemented mandatory mask wearing, in public. And so our governor shut our state down and said, you will not, if you're not an essential worker. I'm like, thank you for determining who's an essential worker.
Just insane.
Clearly I knew I was essential, because somebody had to be there to take in all of the criminals that they had just created by
Yeah, yeah,
issuing
exactly.
lockdown orders. Uh,
Insane.
and I started to, publicly started to speak out, and in conversation with fellow staff, they'd ask me, "Man, what do we do? Like, I don't agree with any of this." And I'm like, "You've got to make that decision for yourself." I says, "You follow the sheriff's orders when you're on duty,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have any authority over your life in private. And
Yep.
if you want to go to Target, or if you want to go to Lowe's, or if you want to go hang out at a friend's house, nobody can stop you." Well,
Yeah.
what if somebody sees us and we get reported? I said,
Yeah.
"You have to decide for yourself."
Mhm.
In
Yeah,
April
it's
of,
individual liberty. Yeah.
and I said April 25th of 2020, I launched my own show, my own channel on YouTube,
Mhm.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, and started I took off. I launched it that morning, took off with my cell phone and my GoPro, and shot my first man on the street interviews at a freedom protest
Mhm.
in front of the governor's residence in Minnesota, and made my first. That was the first time that I ever spoke in front of a large crowd in that way. And after interviewing people and having some really good interactions and a couple of pretty heated, not me being heated, but people being very heated towards me
Sure.
for even being there, um, I I spoke on the steps of the governor's residence, the outside of the gate, and was calling him to account, and told him, basically told him, it's like, "You're a servant of the people, that the Constitution doesn't give you the authority to do this."
Right.
Um, and all of a sudden, I started getting traction, and my channel started to grow very slowly. It was, it's people like,
Yeah.
"Who are you? Like, why would we care what you have to say?" Um,
Sure.
but I just started to see the tyranny ramping up.
Oh,
And then, of
yeah.
course, Labor Day weekend, George Floyd was killed in a
Oh, yeah.
tragic event, and political leaders across the state of Minnesota couldn't get out ahead of it fast enough to declare how horrible law enforcement was. And the irony it was is that the mayor of Rochester,
Mhm.
Kim Norton, on the steps of the government center on the night of May 29th, stood on the steps of the government center right in front of the sheriff's office, and said about her own police force, the Rochester Police Department, and the sheriff of Olmsted County's crew, said, "It's time that all minorities in the state, in Olmsted County and in Rochester, finally began to feel safe in the hands of law enforcement again." She said this while they were trying
Right.
to riot, literally trying to
Yeah.
riot. They were throwing fireworks, and I'm not talking like little ladyfingers and bottle rockets. They were throwing like M80 level explosives
Jeez.
and cherry bombs and whatnot. They were throwing them, and they were rioting and blocking the streets and whatnot in front of the government center, right outside of the detention center. I was seeing all of this play out. I happened to have the video feed on of the mayor saying these things,
Mhm.
and I got in my vehicle on the way home that morning and shot a video saying, "Elected servants, you need to choose your words carefully."
Yeah.
I got talked to that night and cautioned that I had no right, basically, to do that, because people knew who I was and where I worked, and that it was a violation of policy and procedure. Even though I said, "Did I identify myself? And they're like, "Well, people can figure out where you work, so you just need to be careful." And that started that I found out a year later almost.
Mhm.
They considered that a disciplinary moment.
Mm.
Didn't tell me that it was a disciplinary moment, and that started a path of discipline that I was unaware I was being disciplined,
Ugh,
and
God.
ultimately began to, without ever identifying that I work for the sheriff's office, never identifying or even claiming to be a representative of the law enforcement community,
Right.
I continued to put out content
Mhm.
and was getting more and more traction. And I began to interview business owners who were saying, "I'm not closing down anymore. I'm opening back up."
Yeah. Good for them.
And so I was on the front end of interviewing people who at the time actually started to get a lot of national traction
Mm-hmm.
for their stand.
Yeah.
And in one case, one of them, I I did content. I did some content about how she was being treated by a local city attorney, and demonstrated how the city attorney, in one case, violated Minnesota state law
Oh, wow.
in by using a panic device in a non-emergency situation just because she was mad at this business owner.
Ugh,
And I
God.
pointed this out, and
Despicable.
in a couple of weeks later, I'm sitting in a conference room with a formal letter of discipline. I wasn't even planning on this tonight. With formal letter of discipline, a disciplinary step notice. Several, like I said, I keep this nearby because a lot of times when I'm doing a live show, people ask me stuff.
You're right.
All of this, pages and pages and pages of things that they had been writing me up for,
Mm.
in private. Things
And they never asked you to sign it or anything else. Just dump it all at once, and
that,
that's
yeah, they
somehow
never approached
appropriate.
me with it, and they dumped it on me. And what it boiled down to was that they had been watching me and were pissed off that I was speaking out against it, and I got wrote up for things. I think I might have told you this at another time, but one of the things I got wrote. Remember, I took an oath, not
Mm-hmm.
just in the act for active duty, but I took an oath to
Right.
keep and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and that meant something to me, which is
Yeah.
why I had begun to speak out. We
Yeah.
talk about this all the time, right? We hear this from
Sure.
people in the community constantly. Where are the constitutional cops? Where are the constitutional deputies? Where are these people who took this oath? Why aren't they speaking out? Well, I wasn't doing it in uniform, but I was speaking out, and I was holding public servants accountable for their actions.
Right. As somebody should.
In a small way, maybe in a tiny little way on my own channel, but I
Yeah.
was doing that, and they were watching me. And I got wrote up. One of the things I got wrote up for was saying that taxes, fees, and assessments are taken ultimately through the threat of force.
Yeah. Oh, they absolutely are. And that's not an opinion. That is an absolute fact.
That
Try not paying your taxes.
right. And I even said that. And then in another comment, I said, and if you don't pay your taxes, men with guns
Mm-hmm.
will come to your house, put you in handcuffs, and haul you off to jail, where you will then be escorted to court in handcuffs. Where if you're
Yes.
found guilty, you will then be put back in handcuffs and escorted back into the jail, where men with handcuffs will then put you in a vehicle and escort you to prison.
Yes. Yeah.
And I said, and they will have guns.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
force. They wrote me up for making that statement. They wrote me up for making the statement about men with guns will arrest you,
Mm-hmm.
because that's disrespectful to the public,
How so?
and it hindered my ability to be a credible witness.
Credible witness to what? Their
If I
malfeasance?
ever get put on the stand to testify about something that I had to take part in,
Uh,
someone could read those comments and discredit me. And I'm like, I said, if anything, my willingness to speak out would make me more credible.
yeah. Yeah.
But
This is
the
just a
way they
fact.
spun it, and they also wrote me up for saying, and I quote, and so no offense to anybody who's still in law enforcement or still in the military or still, what, but cops, firefighters, and EMTs aren't all heroes.
That's also a fact.
They wrote me up for that.
Yeah. Ever heard of the Golden State Killer? He's kind of not a hero.
No, no. He was a hero.
Yeah.
He was a hero. He just did that thing that we can't
Yeah.
associate that with what he did, but
Yeah. He was
he was
mostly heroic. Yeah.
mostly
Yeah. That's,
it
yeah.
was a mostly heroic murderer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Holy crap.
and so it was just that published a video of yourself disobeying a lawful order. Well, I
Which
asked for
lawful order?
clarification. Well, you have a video out there where you clearly have a video of yourself not wearing a mask in public. I said, so what's the lawful order I violated?
Yeah.
Well, the governor's order. I said, that's not a lawful order.
Nope.
According to our policy and procedure, according to the civil service standards, lawful orders are only those things pertaining to my my duties as a deputy and disobeying a lawful order in my duties as a deputy inside of the detention center. If they give me a lawful order and I disobey it, then I can be disciplined. Me not wearing a mask in public when I'm
Yeah.
not in uniform, when I am not identifying myself as a representative of this agency, I am not disobeying a lawful order. The governor doesn't have that authority over me, and you don't have that authority over me.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just a write-up. And a few days later, they told me I was under internal investigation
Oh my God.
and ordered me to take down content as it related to the city attorney. And they put me under internal investigation for 60 days.
Holy
And
shit.
kept me on duty during that time. Most people under investigation for that long get put on paid administrative leave.
Mm-hmm.
I posit, and I believe it's true, they put me under internal investigation before they told me, and then kept me on duty because they knew they were walking on really shaky First Amendment grounds.
Oh
And
yeah.
and you've gotten to know me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When you do something like that to me, I'm going to start digging, and I have
Oh yeah.
all of the case law and all of the decisions by the Supreme Court and all of the circuit courts and all the appellate courts and all the district courts that show everything they did to me has already been rejected by the Supreme Court. Even left-leaning Supreme Courts
Oh yeah. Yeah.
have just trounced on any government entity for doing something like this.
Yeah.
And my union rep was like, we're going to destroy them on this. And I think what they did is they did that because they knew that what they were doing was retaliatory.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%.
They ended up siding with the city attorney that and the chief of police of this other town who I called out for their negative behavior and called on people to take action
Mm-hmm.
in a email and phone call campaign, which is what you do with public servants.
Yeah.
Which is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to take the action matters into your own hands. You're supposed to have a,
Right.
To put political pressure on them through civil interaction to say you're making a bad decision. We're demanding that you not do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe what they did was they kept me on duty to try and keep pressure on me to make some sort of actual technical mistake that they could then use to justify terminating me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow. That is some shady shit.
My union attorney actually said, I said, I think that's what they're doing. And he's like, I'm pretty sure they are. I'm paraphrasing several hours of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then said to him, I said, do they understand? He goes, I don't think they realize who they're dealing with.
Yeah.
If they think you're just going to stop.
Right.
And like,
silly.
And so we talked about it, and we went, I mean, and the whole story is long and it's ugly. The accusations were just asinine, just things like the claiming that I threatened in my videos, threatened the safety of the city attorney. And my union attorney is like,
yeah.
He's like, he never once ever in fact, his videos constantly, he says things when he's talking about public servants and holding them accountable. He says, this is not a call to violence. I'm calling you to take action through email and phone calls.
Yes.
He points that out constantly.
Words are violence, though. Didn't you know that?
Well, boy, yeah.
Fires are mostly peaceful.
Fires are mostly peaceful. Words are violence.
Yes.
They accuse me of physically aggressing someone, a counter protester, at a freedom event put on by this gal in the city. They accuse me of physically aggressing counter protesters, like literally assaultive behavior. And the irony of it is that I simply walked across the street to try and talk to these people to find out why they were counter protesting us. And when I walked across the street, they scattered. Like they ran away from me, and they're like, keep your distance. You're not wearing a mask or something like that. I mean, it's been like 2 years almost or whatever. And I'm like, wait, are you afraid of me? Like, yeah, you're not wearing a mask. And so I turned around and I backed up and I kept my distance and continued to engage with them. And they kept advancing on me. They kept advancing on me, and nobody made any contact, but I was told that was assaultive behavior. And then the counter protesters tried to get the cops involved. They were like, he's threatening us, and they were like, we're not getting involved here. One of them tried to tell me I needed to keep my distance, and I'm like, I am keeping my distance. I said they're aggressive, they're aggressing me, if you will. One gal just kept coming up and getting her hand in my face, and I'm like, hey, sister, back up.
Yeah, relax, lady.
And so it just it was all. Here's what it is. I was way ahead of the January 6 people.
Yeah.
In that I watched the system lie about me. They lied about me. The system, not people in public, the system lied about me because they didn't like my opinion.
Yeah.
And
it's ludicrous.
Yeah, and then I found out later on that this city attorney and this chief of police, not only did they file formal complaints, but they literally, I was told this, that they contacted the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is the Minnesota version of the FBI, and allegedly contacted the FBI about me.
Good God.
Why?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, the FBI's got their hands full of like real criminals, and
well, the FBI is actually full of real criminals, as we're finding out
they're committing the crimes. That's the only way they can solve them. I mean,
they're committing the crimes and then charging up the people they've conned into going along with them.
Yeah.
I.e., the Michigan Whitmer
how do I get that job? Yeah,
kidnapping plot. No, don't ask. They might show up. Hey, are you really interested? Would you like to do that?
Because
and I'm literally, I was on the forefront of law enforcement, and it's at a couple of levels, lying about what I did and smearing me and twisting how I was doing things, specifically to silence me, was what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so they moved to terminate me, and we fought them, and they put me out. Well, they put me out on paid administrative leave. Finally, after over 60 days of investigation, they put me out on paid administrative leave on April 30th. And we had all the hearings and everything that are technically we're supposed to do. And there's a lot more to the story, and I don't want to belabor it here, but they did send a letter with an intent to terminate. We had the hearing to for them to give them an opportunity. Basically, my union attorney laid out our defense and even had me talk. And he says, because I never have anybody talk in these situations.
Oh, yeah, never.
He says, but he says, I'm going to have you talk because they're not going to be able to deal with it. And at one point during that hearing, the head of the entire Olmsted County HR, not just for the sheriff's office, but the entire Olmsted County HR, they had the county attorney had a representative there. They had 3 people from the HR department, plus the chief deputy, were all sitting there. And the head of the HR department, I found out later, hadn't watched any of my content, was just taking everything that the sheriff was telling him as a matter of fact.
Of course.
And only took the report that was handed to him by the private attorney that they hired to a tune of at least $200 an hour. A private attorney to the tune of at least $200 an hour for 60 days, mind you. And I don't know how many hours it was, but just figure 2 hours a day minimum, 60 days, 120 hours at about $150, $200. Exactly.
On that one person.
On me, for what?
Yeah.
And he looked at me and goes, well, what if I told you that we have proof that you broke the law? And I said, then provide it, because I'm going to reject the premise. I reject the premise that you have the proof. Well, what if we do? I said, I'm not playing what if with you. This is in the hearing. I'm like, I'm not playing what if with you. I reject your premise. I didn't break any law. I said, sure, people may not be happy with me.
Yeah.
But I'm a damn good deputy, and I'm damn good at what I do. Maybe not the best deputy, but I'm damn good at what I do. My ratings are superior.
Mm-hmm.
I do a wonderful job. I'm reliable, and I'm a team leader. I lead my team.
Yeah.
I'm a veteran staff member. I'm being persecuted. You're trying to intimidate me into signing to willfully turning in my resignation. And I said, then
Mhm.
that's not going to happen because I haven't done anything wrong. And if I have to, I'll fight you on this.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I found out months later that when my union attorney was asked to step into his office, the HR guy's office, it was just them. He said, just me and you. And my union attorney stepped in, and he met me later that day, or an hour later. I bought him
Mhm.
a beer, said, thanks for everything you're doing for me. And
Yeah.
he said, I just need to ask you one question. I said, what's that? And he goes, you want to fight this? And I said, yep. He goes, okay, I have the report. Everything they have on you is twisted and BS.
Mhm.
So if you want to fight, we'll fight. He says, I'll be pleased to fight them on this. He says, I may not agree with
Oh,
you on
good.
everything, but
Yeah.
I'll be pleased to fight them. That was June of last year.
Wow.
And I sat until September,
Holy crap.
not knowing what was going on, and staying in contact with my union rep and with my union attorney, but no contact with anybody else from the sheriff's office because they're all terrified. Once somebody gets put on administrative leave, they're terrified.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what did they do?
Yeah, yeah.
What, you know,
Like
like,
a
I don't want
leper.
to be wrapped up with these people.
Right.
And excuse me, I'm dry.
That's what I should have had with me. Glass of
Um,
water. Damn it. Next time.
they waited and waited and waited and waited and waited, and I finally looked around at the effect it was having on me, knowing that I was going to win this,
Yeah.
saying, when I win, can I go back to work for this guy?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge
Am
question.
I ever going to be safe? Not just necessarily physically or security
Right.
wise, but everything that happens to me from this point forward, everything I do is going to be under such scrutiny.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, because he's going to be pissed,
Of
because
course.
I already knew he was pissed. He was pissed that he couldn't just terminate me outright.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
pissed they had to keep paying me because I'm a veteran.
Mhm.
And I asked the union rep, what it would look like. And he goes, well, it's funny that you asked that because they've been wanting to pay you off ever since that meeting.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, Julian asked me, what is it going to take to make this go away?
Wow. As a taxpayer, like I just want well, I mean, not a taxpayer for that municipality,
No,
but
but it's just
just in general, I
in
want
general.
everyone just sacked, fired across the board. This is insane.
I know. I don't think I told you this part of the story before.
No, no.
And and I said, what? He goes, yeah, he wanted to know what you would take then. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, he's nowhere near being ready to take a payoff because he hasn't done anything wrong.
Right.
And quite frankly, when we're done, you won't have a policy and procedure about social media because that's mostly what they were trying to use was social media policy and procedure to
Mhm.
try and violate me. He says everything about your social media policy and procedure is a violation of the First Amendment. It's unlawful. And he said, and it's got a prior restraint.
Mhm.
Because at one point they even told me, well, if next time you want to post something, you should probably ask our guidance on it before you post it. I'm like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the question is can you go back to work for these guys? And I said,
Yeah.
can I? Probably. Should I? I don't know. Will I? I said, even when I win, I don't know that I can. I said, if I win, I'll probably come back in, give them 2 weeks and walk out.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be the smart move.
And he said, because if you want to fight this, you'll get paid. If this drags out 15 years, you'll get paid every single day. And I
Mhm.
said, I can't put myself through that. The stress is, I said, not to mention the fact that if I try to apply for a job and they ask me if they can contact my employer, what am I going to tell them?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just you're screwed.
Because I spent that whole summer last summer, like not being able to make any money because I
Yeah.
couldn't go any. I mean, I was getting paid, so that was nice, but I couldn't go and put anything in the bank because
Mhm.
to prepare for what I knew was ultimately going to end up happening, I couldn't prepare because if I went and applied for a job and they asked me, well, where do you work? And the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office. Well, can we
Yeah.
contact your employer? Why are you leaving that? I'm like,
Yeah. You know, you may have read some papers. I mean, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it's a tough one.
and he said, well, what would you want? And I said, personally, for the way they're treating me, they should pay me off until my retirement. So the way, based on, cost of rate, living adjustments throughout the years, I said 15 more years. I said about $1.8 million. He goes, they're not going to do that. I said,
Yeah.
no, but they should. They
Yeah.
should.
No kidding.
And he goes, well, here's what I'll do. I said, I'm not making the first offer, Jim. I'm not making the first offer. If they want this to go away, they can make me an offer, and they better not insult me. And he went back, and of course, their very first thing that they did was sent back an insult. The sheriff said, I'll give him 3 weeks' pay. And they didn't want to pay me my PTO.
Unbelievable.
And before he even told me what the offer was, he rejected it and told them they could shove it. Yeah. And then he sent me an email with the offer saying, just so you know, I've already rejected it. And his rejection basically told the HR head, no, we told you not to insult us. That's insulting. We'll see you in court.
Yeah.
Boy, did that start the monkeys flying. Hold on. Don't get hasty. Don't get hasty. And he says, no, you better come back with something. And it took another several weeks for them. And I found out after the fact that it was the sheriff. He wanted me terminated, period. He wanted me gone. He didn't want any settlement. He wanted to be able to point out that he terminated this radical dissident, and because he's worried about saving face. That's it.
Unbelievable. Oh God. And people complain about, oh, we can't find good cops. It's like, well, if this is how good cops are treated, who's signing up for this job? Who's going to do it?
And, and granted, I wasn't on the streets, but there are,
doesn't matter.
Make no mistake. What he did to me, what the sheriff did to me, what the chief deputy did to me was done to send a message.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
To warn people, you will fall in line or you will be dealt with.
Yep.
And so what the thing they do is when they put you on administrative leave, they send out an email across the entire sheriff's office. Deputy so-and-so has been placed on administrative leave. He or she no longer has access to the secure facility, cannot be inside the perimeter unless they're escorted by Captain so-and-so, Captain so-and-so, Captain so-and-so, or by the chief deputy, yada, 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 yada. And then when they do that, they put that pressure on you that isolates you immediately from your family, your work family, people who you literally have been putting your life on the line with.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, nobody knows. Well, the problem is for them, I was staying in contact with quite a few people, and they're like, because the minute I walked out, I didn't even get 15 minutes from the facility, and I was getting phone calls and text messages. We just got the emails, because a lot of these guys are getting their emails at home. They're like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. We know you. What? And I told them, I said, whatever they tell you it is, or what they don't tell you, you know me, and trust me that what's happening is a load of crap. And so when I finally made the decision that I was going to let them make offers and take a settlement, I wrote a very long, detailed email for the entire sheriff's office, Deputy Sheriff's Association, which was our union. We were a big enough organization to have our own union. We didn't have to contract out to a bigger police union.
Right.
And the day that my resignation was final and the payout had come to me, I hit send on that email, and it went to every single line person that was not a supervisor that was in the union, detailing everything that had happened and everything that I had done and everything that they had done to me. And I don't know how many people read it, but I know a lot of people did, because people were like, what the hell? And it was so bad, it was going around, that sergeants were asking line staff, we heard TC is going to put out a video about this. When is that video coming out?
Oh, wow.
And the line staff were like, we don't know what you're talking about. They weren't doing it to like throw me under the bus. They're like, what video? What are you talking about? Because nobody was going to talk to them about it. They didn't trust. At that point, they trusted no one. They didn't trust any of their sergeants. They didn't trust the captains. They certainly didn't trust the chief deputy, and they certainly didn't trust the sheriff. And then I found out later on that a lot of these sergeants were messaging people who were no longer with the sheriff's office, who had been run through the ringer much the same way I was, saying, we want to see this. What the hell happened to him? We want to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so still to this day, I still put out parts of the story a little bit by little
Mhm.
bit. It's like, okay, I'm a little bit of a manipulator. I want my algorithm on YouTube to, like, I want to
Yeah.
keep people's attention, and my personal story has attracted some attention to my channel.
Good.
But um, it's it's been interesting because people are coming out of the woodwork going, yeah, that's why I left.
Wow.
And almost to a man, not all of them, but almost to a man, every single one of them that has left because they were one of the hard workers who were tired of
Yep.
getting crapped on.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't.
They weren't just going to
Y-
follow orders blindly.
yeah. Yeah. You have to take care of your good people, and if you're crapping on them, and
Yep.
they're not going to stick around. They're not going to last. And especially like when you have someone who really is that solid, that dependable. I mean, they do believe in the mission to some degree, much closer to their core than their less motivated counterparts. I mean, there's something more intrinsic to their being that leads them to be that dedicated. And when you treat them like shit, you violate that, you damage that. And what the hell are they going to stick around for? It ain't the money,
I
you
made
know.
2 hour. I made well. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I was making a lot more money then than I'm
Mhm.
making now. I'm not even making a quarter of what
Wow.
I was making
Wow.
now. Like, I'm not in great shape anymore. Well,
Yeah.
I'm getting in better physical shape, but that's
That's
because I can't
important.
afford to buy groceries. No,
Well,
no,
I understand.
no. But I was a guy that would drive 2 hours, a 30
Mhm.
mile drive that would take 2 hours in a snowstorm to get to work.
Wow.
I would stay after my shift would end. We had a really bad snowstorm a few years ago. I motivated. I called up everybody else and said, "Hey, uh, C platoon's not going to be able to make it in on time. The storm is bad. We're talking. We got dumped on overnight. Dumped
Mhm.
on." And
Yep.
I called everybody else up and I said, "Guys, let's stay."
Yeah.
Now,
Makes sense.
would they have done it without me? Probably. But
Right.
I just called everybody up in their units and saying, "Guys, we're not getting out of here. We can't leave until we're replaced anyway. But let's just let's just band together and agree that not one of us leaves until all of our reliefs are here, or until the oncoming sergeant says you're good to go.
Yeah,
We'll stay
yeah.
and help out."
Yeah.
I did, and then I missed work that night because I didn't have a place to stay, and so
Mhm.
I drove home. And what a 30-minute drive should have been 30-minute drive
Mhm.
actually ended up taking me 4.5 hours. So by
Wow.
the time I got home and got myself into my home,
Mhm.
it was almost it was almost 2 o'clock, and I called and said I can't make it back in tonight. I want to, but I can't.
Yeah.
And then those of us that didn't make it in got chewed out.
Psh, Just just ridiculous. Yeah, and it's petty stuff
People
like that.
walked, people walked into work that morning, and it still took them hours to get to
Oh,
work.
of course. Yeah. Yeah,
And
insane.
so that's what I did. That's who I was. And did I make mistakes? Hell yeah, I made mistakes.
Oh, yeah,
But
you're a human
I
being.
loved my job, and I would tell the detainees on a regular basis. I still got detainees reaching out to me going, "Why haven't we seen you?" I said, "Why are you there to wonder why you aren't seeing me?"
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. That's the bigger philosophical
that's
question at
let's that's
hand.
that's that question. But then I see others who are like, "Man, I haven't been in since the last time I saw you there,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to tell you." I had a guy walk up to me last summer, put his arms around me, hug me, and go, "Thanks for being one of the nice guys."
Wow.
And it wasn't, and it wasn't one of those, "You're the nice guy who let us get away with everything." And I said, "What do you
Right.
mean nice? Because nobody likes me because I'm nice." I said, "I'm a
Yeah,
hard ass."
yeah.
I'm like, I am. I was I was a rules guy. You're gonna follow the rules. You're gonna treat me with respect because I'm not gonna swear at you, and you're not gonna swear at me. We're gonna handle this as adults.
Yeah.
But I would tell them, they're like, "Why, when people are freaking out on you, do you ultimately end up going back to them and having a civil conversation with them?" I said, "Because these people are in their worst condition. Like,
Yep.
it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. And it's not that I don't care, but you could just have gotten news that one of your best friends or a family member that you love dearly died.
Mhm.
That's bad,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
have the comfort of home. These
Mhm.
people are literally in the worst spot of their life. They
Yeah.
have no freedom.
Mhm.
They're not being treated like adults.
Right.
I see them not as these, horrible uh, people that should be isolated from society. I see them as people who have committed a crime, need to be held accountable for it, but also probably need somebody that's going to treat them like they're human beings.
Right.
And
Yeah.
my goal at the beginning of every shift was to go in and say to them, how, not in words, but like at the beginning of every shift, how can I have a positive impact on at least one of these people today?
Yeah. Simple.
And sometimes that meant holding them accountable for really bad behavior, but then talking
Mhm.
to them about it later on. And sometimes it was like, hey, I heard that your mom died and I know you're in here. But if you need to talk or if you need to cry and you need somebody to listen to you, you let me know.
Yeah.
And so I still, just last week, I had a guy reach out to me because he saw my uniform burning party because I finally got around. Well, it's Minnesota. Like I waited until the weather cleared up.
Sure.
So a couple of weeks ago, I put a video up of me burning through my uniforms. And he goes, man, I saw you burning your uniforms. He says, I'm glad to see you got out, but I'm kind of sad that
Yeah.
you're not there anymore because you were always decent to me. One of the few.
Wow.
And I was like, that's what I miss, Andrea.
Yeah.
That's what I miss. I'm actually glad I'm not doing the work anymore, but I certainly miss the money.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I hear that. I have a pay cut from what I was doing last year too, and yeah, it's tough to make ends meet. And
But you get to work at Gas Digital, so
yeah, I mean it ain't all bad, but yeah, I do know pay cuts, especially ones that you weren't really planning for,
yep.
are pretty tough. Even ones that you were planning for, they can be really rough. Especially if you're not getting to do and fulfill the mission that you enjoyed, that you're passionate about, that you had no intention of walking away from.
I was going to retire there, but it's what it is now, right? So I
Yeah.
hate it when people go, "It is what it is." Like that literally is the most nonsense thing. Like, duh,
Yeah.
it is what it is. That's not what I'm complaining. I'm not
It's
complaining
like,
that
"Thanks,
it's
Kamala
not what it
Harris.
was.
Really appreciate you tagging that for me, vacuous idiot." Yeah.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about Kamala or me now?
Kamala, yeah, yeah. Only Kamala. No, you, I appreciate you, putting up the good fight for liberty. I mean, even not
Now
the
that you
result that
know
any
the
of
whole
us wanted.
story.
And I appreciate you sharing that, and, it really should make everyone's blood boil. I mean, I always kinda think, "Gosh, why don't we have good cops?" And then I hear stories like this, it's like, "Oh, well, this is why." Yes, this is precisely why we chase out all the good ones, because who in their right mind is gonna put up with that? It's crazy.
It, my brother's been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and he's literally the guy that you want to pull you over on your DUI.
Yeah.
Not because he's going to let you go, but he's just not going to treat you like crap.
Yeah.
He's the guy that you want to show up when there's a domestic call and the neighbors hear you arguing or fighting or what. He's the guy that's going to come over and he's going to diffuse it. He's going to de-escalate and he's going to do what the law requires him to do, but he's going to do
Mhm.
it with decency and respect.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of guys that I consider to be good friends that are cops in Rochester, and a couple
Mhm.
of guys that are still deputies for my former employer that I look at them and I go, I'd still die for these guys.
Yeah.
And
They're still amazing.
they're still amazing. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, most of them, they got a timer set
Oh,
and
yeah.
they have an exit. They're like, okay, if this happens, I'm done. I'm
Mhm.
done. Even if it means I don't get my full retirement,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the system is chewing up and spitting out the decent guys, because all the system wants anymore are order takers. People who are
Yep.
willing to just do their job. I was
Oh,
just
yeah.
following orders. That's what they want. That's what the system
Yep.
wants, is somebody who's just going to follow orders. And just like the military is bleeding out right now,
Yeah.
not only is the
Big
military
time.
bleeding out, but they can't get anybody to enlist.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh, it's wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no infusion of new blood, and all the old blood is leaving,
Mhm.
and the only ones that are staying are order takers.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm
because that's
not knocking them all. Don't get me wrong. I know there are solid people out there still,
Sure.
But
But I mean, by and large, I mean, trends cannot be ignored, and that's what it
right,
is.
and that's why. And
Mhm.
it's any of these public servant positions where you have a person who takes an oath, who who is in public scrutiny on a
Mhm.
daily basis. Like pretty much everybody in the public sector swears an oath to the
Mhm.
Constitution, in
Yep.
that government job. But there's a certain segment of that oath taking group who really you have to count on to honor that oath.
Yeah.
And it's the people who are enforcing the laws
Yep.
and people who are assigned with defending our republic.
Mhm.
And many of them today, sadly, do not understand that.
Yeah.
And it's what's hurting the career fields, both the military and law enforcement world,
Oh, yeah.
but it's also hurting our republic.
Yeah. Oh,
And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
it's what it is. They have to wake up. They have to ask. They have to. I told this to a guy just the other day that I've been friends with for years, and literally had massive amounts of respect for him. Still do. He's an active cop.
Mhm.
Got mad at me for my position on Uvalde, and told me that I'm being bitter and that I hate all cops, and which is I can't state enough that that's not true.
Right.
But
Right.
this just they don't get the break anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, "You're one of the good ones, brother. You're one of the good ones.
Yeah.
Stay that way, but get out
Yeah.
because they're going to chew you up and spit you out."
Absolutely. Yeah. If they have anything to say about it.
Well, now you got two shows out of this.
Yeah, no, this is great. I don't really have like a
You
hard
to, you told me
hard cap
40
on time.
minutes and I'm
You
double
doubled it.
we doubled that. So,
No, that's great, and it's an important story, and not every week has to be a happy ending or anything like that. Certainly, if there's something important you want to bring to the forefront, as you did, I'm all in favor of it. It's a story that needs to get out, and I don't think it's heard enough. So, really appreciate you coming on to let us all know about it.
well, I appreciate it. And if anybody wants to, you know what my links are. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I in post links will be in the description for you. And do I drop your Twitter handle on there as well if people want
oh,
to buy
absolutely.
coffee?
They can message me on Twitter at Robe Regiment, or they can message me on Facebook at TC Pearson, or they can
Okay.
email me at tcpearson@protonmail.com. I have coffee. It's
All
best.
right.
Andrea, I'll just hold this. Andrea will do the commercial.
Yes, I've had this coffee. I've only had it in a French press. It's amazing. If you don't buy this coffee, you should still subscribe to my YouTube channel, but I'll just think less of you. But
Yeah.
definitely buy TC's coffee. It's amazing. Really good
Uh,
stuff.
and I have a subscribe star now too. So
Oh, nice.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment podcast on Subscribestar, and there is some exclusive content. I just had Spike Cohen on
Holy
a
cow, what
few
a
weeks
cat.
a few weeks ago, and I got more uh, Libertarians coming on for a series that I'm doing, and I think that I'm going to be able to nail down Matt's co-host, or excuse me, Mike Spike's co-host Matt
Okay.
from the Muddied Waters of Liberty. I'm saying that Muddied Waters of Media, Matt
Okay.
Wright, and I think I'm angling to be able to get at least two more people from Muddied Waters Network on, and I think I'm on track to get Josh Smith on, who was just voted in as vice chair of the Libertarian Party
All
um,
right.
during their convention. So,
Awesome.
and the reason for that is that I want to start seeing, more traditionally minded, constitutionally conservative so-called Republicans linking arms with other constitutionally conservative types on the libertarian side instead of feeling like we're abandoned.
Right.
And so I'm doing a series called the Libertarian Lowdown on my channel, where I'm bringing on these reasonable libertarians who don't wear boots on their head, um, like the Supreme Vermin, and
Yeah.
having these conversations that I think are incredibly important. So far, I've had Spike and um, Anthony Welty, who is a big activist within the libertarian movement, was actually Spike's tour manager as he was traveling
nice.
around for a while. And
Oh, that's great.
so that's what I do. So I've
All right.
got enough subscribers to be monetized, which, by the way, if you're watching this because you know who I am, but you don't know who Andrea is, you need to get over to Andrea's channel and subscribe, because we need to boost her up there so that she has enough subscribers that her employer will actually pick up her program.
That is an excellent end goal. And yeah, I'll put all the links in the description, and especially if you want to get a hold of TC for coffee, but also watch his broadcasts. They are amazing.
I appreciate that, Andrea.
And TC, thanks so much for coming on.